Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. And now the Friday Crime Report. San Luis Obispo, California, August 29th, 2017. Kennedy Love was a 22-year-old third-year student at Cal Poly studying landscaping architecture. At around 11:30 p.m., he was riding his bicycle on Foothill Boulevard in San Luis Obispo. He was killed when a driver struck him at a high rate of speed and kept going. The assailant didn't stop, didn't even bother to summon help. It was a reprehensible act of hit and run. Kennedy Love died at the scene. Witnesses would later tell the police that they saw a vehicle with damage to the driver's side window pull into the parking lot of a nearby Panda Express. Witnesses say that 2 women got out of the car and examined the damage to the vehicle, but they didn't call for help. They didn't tell anyone what had just happened. Instead, the 2 women just got back into the car and fled the scene. Police would soon locate the vehicle that killed Kennedy Love. It had been abandoned, but they were still able to trace it back to its owner, who was in Los Osos. They determined that the killer was 17-year-old Gianna Brencola. She confessed to drinking and crashing her car into Kennedy Love. Her blood alcohol level was .148, which was twice the legal limit of .08. She was arrested for hit and run. The DA said that she would be tried as an adult, and they planned to file 4 charges against her, including vehicular manslaughter while intoxicated without gross negligence, driving under the influence causing death, and hit and run. The charges carried several criminal enhancements that could add significant time to a possible sentence if she was convicted. But, of course, she has genetic immunity from law, so as soon as the cameras were gone, racial privilege kicked in, and all the so-called enhancements went right away. In April 2018, she was allowed to have a sweetheart plea deal that basically let her plea with no particular sentence being required, which we all recognize was the DA allowing this killer to get away with murder. She was sentenced to a mere 7 years in prison, but of course racial privilege means immunity from the law, so she was released December of the very next year by the California Department of Corrections because she had, get this, completed a so-called community re-entry program. Well, she killed a man, then fled the scene, so obviously this was a turning point in her life, right? I mean, the white authorities in the California Department of Corrections said she completed a re-entry program, so they were certifying that she was now a reformed killer. And these are the people who refuse to let black defendants go for minor offenses, but obviously their judgment can't be questioned, right? I mean, they must be excellent judges of character, and they're not just letting criminals remain on the streets because of their race, right? Of course not. The same way Ethan Couch, the so-called affluenza teen, was given a slap on the wrist after he killed 4 people while he was driving drunk, Gianna Brencola would get the same treatment. Less than 2 years after she was released, Gianna Brencola was arrested again after she had struck 4 parked cars while driving drunk on Halloween 2021. In this instance, she also tried to drive away from the scene of the crime, but only this time bystanders were able to stop her and take the keys out of the ignition. Witnesses say that Gianna Brencola tried to offer them money if they would let her go. So what she wanted was for this to be yet another hit and run. Her blood alcohol level this time exceeded 0.3%. That's more than 3 times the legal limit. Remember, her prior criminal case involved a blood alcohol level of only 0.148%, which was less than double the legal allowed blood alcohol content. But this time around, it was triple the legal limit. So the only thing she learned was to drink more. So we see how great the California Department of Corrections is at judging character, and we see how effective their re-entry programs are at making sure killers are qualified to re-enter society. Well, you can guess what happened next. There was the usual insincere tough talk from the DA again about hitting her with major charges, and then she was promptly allowed to enter a plea deal which will only require her to do 6 years tops. But as we all know, last time she was sentenced to 7 years, and I think we all know how that one turned out. Now, the way the white media reported on this, they said that this is her 2nd strike under California law. There's a little factoid that the white media has decided to leave out of all their coverage of Gianna Brencola's latest DUI crime. You see, Gianna Brencola was responsible for another crash 4 months before she killed Kennedy Love. Now, when you click on the link that's supposed to take you to the story about the April 30th, 2017 crash she was involved in, what you get instead is a page not found error. That's very interesting that this story in particular would be conveniently missing. But of course, being the black media, we're not just uncompromising, we're relentless too. So all you gotta do is use the Wayback Machine and you can see a snapshot showing an archived version of the story. A story which the white media seems interested in forgetting. In that instance, she got into a head-on collision with another car, injuring 2 people. Oh, and just so you know, that crash also happened on Foothill Boulevard, the exact same place where she killed Kennedy Love. In that particular case, the DA refused to charge her. That's right. You have this teenage punk who got herself into a head-on collision, and the DA decides, well, I'm not doing anything about this. Sure, you injured some people. Sure, you destroyed some property. You could have killed somebody or killed 2 people anyway, but I'm not doing anything about it because, hey, no autopsy, no foul, right? Now, if the DA had merely decided not to ignore the law, if he had decided to merely do his job, if she didn't have genetic immunity from law extended to her, then she would have been charged. And she would never have been on the streets in the first place, and Kennedy Love would still be alive today, if the DA had merely done his job. Kennedy Love's blood is as much on the hands of the DA as it is Gianna Brencola, but no politician and no political candidate will ever run on a platform of putting someone with genetic immunity from law in prison, or run on a platform of promising to finally stop letting the Gianna Brencolas be immune from the law. The problem isn't that they haven't had the goods on her until now. The problem is that the authorities are refusing to do their jobs based on the race of the person in front of them. And we see the DA is not the only one refusing to do his job. The white media is also deciding they're not going to do theirs either. Why are the Gianna Brencolas never talked about? These are people who are released and go on to engage in the exact same criminal behavior and to commit the exact same crimes, and many times in the exact same places. And yet the white media doesn't make the Gianna Brencolas the face of why we need tougher laws and why we need tougher legislation to keep people like her in a cage. And why is that? Because when it comes to talking about crime, they want to condition the public to only think of black people. Crime is not supposed to be Gianna Brencola killing a young man and destroying property. Crime means black people. Period. But what happened was not some failure of the law. It was the law working exactly the way it was designed. For black people, the law has nothing but pitfalls, trapdoors, and roadblocks. But for other people, it's engineered to have nothing but back doors and escape hatches, which will be given to them by the very prosecutors and parole boards and judges who are supposed to make sure that they never get out of prison in the first place. Everybody understands that under white supremacy, the charges that get filed against you, the sentence you receive, and how much of it you have to serve is not based on the crime you're accused of at all, is not based on how heinous the crime was or the evidence against you. It's based solely on one thing and one thing only: the color of your skin. The laws and the apparatuses that administrate it are color-coded. The laws were not meant to punish the Gianna Brencolas. They were written to punish black people. The criminal class in America are the Dylan Roofs, the Peyton Gendrys, the Gianna Brencolas. They are also the recidivist class because they commit the same exact crimes in the same exact places over and over and over. But then again, why shouldn't they? They already know they have genetic immunity from law. They know from the very beginning that unless they commit a mass murder, then the system's guaranteed to give them a slap on the wrist. And these racist DAs and judges who refuse to punish them also know that the white media won't put a spotlight on any of them. They'll be able to keep their prosecutor's office or keep their job on the bench, and the public's never going to be focused on punishing them because the white media won't allow it. Look at what happened in California after Brock Turner raped that girl. The judge in that case, Aaron Persky, totally ignored the law and blatantly said in open court that he did not care what the law said or what he was supposed to do. He didn't want to ruin Brock Turner's life. At no point did Persky express any concern about the young woman whose life Turner ruined. It took a university professor rallying the public to hold that corrupt judge accountable, but it wasn't with any of the white media's help. The white media, on the other hand, they decided to be the PR squad for Aaron Persky. They said, why, if you recall this judge and take him off the bench, well, every other judge will be terrified to do their jobs. These judges, why, they'll just give people hard sentences no matter what the crime because they're going to be terrified of getting recalled if they don't. Well, would you like to know when Aaron Persky was recalled? June 2018. Over 4 years ago. So, have you seen any of the judges in California giving the Brock Turners or the Gianna Brencolas harsh sentences, and other people with genetic immunity from law just getting the max? When has that started? The white media was making a blatant plea to maintain their racial privilege. I'm talking about the white medias, to maintain their genetic immunity from the law. They didn't care about Aaron Persky. The issue that was at stake was that the people who run and operate the white media look at the behavior of Gianna Brencola, Ethan Couch, Brock Turner, and they see their own behavior. They see how these criminals are immune from the law based on race. And as the white media, they want to make sure they have that same immunity for themselves because they need it. They use it every day. The same system of racial privilege that allowed Brock Turner to walk scot-free is also the same system of racial privilege that made Aaron Persky a judge in the first place. The same system of racial privilege that allows the denizens of the white media to have their cushy jobs and live their undeservedly plush lifestyles. They are all bound by the same chain of racial privilege, and they all benefit from it, and they all need it. They couldn't do without it. So no matter what they think of Brock Turner, no matter what he's done, when the white media sees someone threatening racial privilege, they're going to scream and howl, and most of all, they're going to lie to protect it. As a result of this across-the-board protection of the criminal class, the Gianna Brencolas and the Brock Turners, they don't really think that they're taking a big risk at all to commit a DUI or to even kill someone. Because everyone knows the prosecutors and the courts and the white media will all swing into action to downplay and minimize those crimes and to bury the reporting of it, to marginalize it, and to not even mention the victims, and to explain to the public why a slap on the wrist is the only acceptable outcome, because anything more than that would be overcharging the perpetrators, who the white media won't even refer to as perpetrators. They'll lie to the public by omission and claim that a career criminal like Brencola is only on her second strike when in reality she's actually on her third. And nobody's going to be looking at the DA and saying, man, you sure screwed up on this one. You're responsible for this. We need to go ahead and put you on Front Street. No, they're going to ignore all of that. The DA pays no price for it. Because to punish the DA for what can only be called criminal negligence would also mean punishing the DA for not upholding genetic immunity from law. Gianna Brencola's criminal record will simply be omitted from the white media's reporting because it doesn't fit their racial innocence narrative. No one questions it and no one opposes it, except for only the black media. Well, that's not justice, it's racial fiat. Normally, when doing these crime reports, I tell you about the mass killings that the white media won't, but in this case, I wanted to use this as a case study in how criminality by certain demographics is always covered up and always minimized, and how even when the white media reports on it in the past, when they decide that it doesn't fit the narrative, they'll go ahead and bury it. And no matter how the white media may try to spin things, or no matter how they try to laud or praise themselves, when you're dealing with the white media, you're never getting the entire story. If you live in California, or even if you live in San Obispo, you probably hadn't even heard of Gianna Brencola, had you? But you should have. Everyone should have heard of her. Because the white media didn't tell you that. Their job is to lie. They lie by telling you things that aren't true, but they also lie by omission. That means they leave things out. The white media does not engage in news coverage. Their job is news cover-ups. This is why you need the black media. We dig for the facts and information that the white media doesn't want you to know. Whenever the white media is reporting on a story, the very first thing you better ask is, okay, now what is it that they're not telling me? Because as it turns out, it's a lot. That Gianna Brencola character, she's not the only one running from her crimes. The white media is also running from their own hit-and-run propaganda too. And as the black media, it's our job to make sure they don't get away either. And that's this week's Friday Crime Report. Keep your eyes open and stay on alert, because there's a lot worse criminals out there than the ones the white corporate media chooses to show you, or in this case, not show you. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors. Burkett Cochrane, David Green, Ogun Keeps Coming Back, Deborah Gallman, and Amir Miller. Salute to them and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.